economy as a whole. Cameroon is not left out as far as this marked region is concerned, and according to report, we are the most hardest hit as far as our economy is concerned. So what are some of those aspects or some of the milieux in which we are lacking that has tripled our economy? Notch.
Yeah. Well, it's important to understand that, like you originally said, the COVID-19 pandemic really hit hard on so many economies, and Cameroon was not left out. But then, when we take a look at the progress of our economy from the end of 2019 to 2021, this is mid-2021, we realize that a lot of sectors have been infected. It's not just one aspect, it's not just education, it's not just health, it's also agriculture, it's also finance, it's also every aspect that is related to our economy, to the growth of our economy, has been touched, from our production level, which of course has always been very poor, to our sales level, to our level of imports or exports, and all of that has been affected, to the level of commodities, that to a level of international trade and international relationship, international transactions with other countries. All of this, there proves that the economy is in crisis. Yeah, there are serious problems. So it's important for us to look at what exactly is the problem. Yeah, because when we're talking about crisis, we cannot say that we are vividly addressing the issue without looking at what is the problem.
So what is the problem?
Yeah, I think that first of all, we are in a country where, without necessarily being critical of the way government handles issues, we're in a country where we don't look at the problem we don't address the proximate cause of issues. Something might happen in a country and there is what we call the proximate cause, and they are generally causes, you see. But then the proximate cause is never addressed. For example, why do we find ourselves in a situation where we are in a country where we have a lot of natural resources in terms of agricultural facilities, but we spend more time consuming goods that are being imported? Why can't we have something of our own? Remember that economy grows from revenue. If there is nothing coming in, nothing will be shown at the level of economy as growth. That is why at some point you realize that the government keeps increasing taxes. Why do they increase taxes? Because they want to find an avenue where they can inflate their income. But that is not the only way. If we were to
increase government's revenue.
Exactly, that's what I'm talking about. If we were to find ourselves in an economy where we produce our own and we sell our own, money will keep turning around. Let me give you an example. What do we consume most often? Today, we encourage people from buying in the supermarkets. Sometimes 90% of the goods in the supermarkets are imported. That's the reality. Now, where does the money goes in? We work money here, it goes out. Now, the government is forced to put themselves in a situation where they have to impose taxes that are not supposed to be imposed on the civilians, just so they can inflate government revenues. But meanwhile, if in these same supermarkets, what was being sold is what is being produced locally, when you see countries like Nigeria that are for years, and South Africa, competing and fighting over economic domination in Africa, it's not because they are extraordinary. It's because they simply consume their own. It's because they simply produce their own. We have rubber. We have resources to produce what we can put on. But how many of our own wares do we put on? Everything we put on is imported from head to toes. It's a problem. In this case, in cases like this, the economy will not grow. Why will it not grow? Why did the COVID-19 affect the economy so much? Because the little that we can even produce, we could no longer produce, we could no longer sell, and as such, every little income went out, and as such, there was nothing that could turn around. Once activities are not ongoing, it means taxes, which is in quotes like the government's main revenue stream, was no longer even possible for the government to execute, because people will not pay taxes if they are home. That's what happened during the COVID-19 period. People were home quarantined for almost 8 months. People will not pay taxes when they are sleeping in their beds. The drivers that are on the highway every day.
Companies are not functioning.
Exactly. So these taxes they will not pay, and as such, the government will not see money coming in. As such, the crisis.
As such, the crisis.
Yeah.
Okay, Notch. Akum Tipo, you equally think that Cameroon's economy is in crisis?
Yes, Vanessa, I accept the fact that we are in crisis, particularly economic crisis. I will just throw some light on the issue of economic crisis. Economic crisis is an economic problem or situation which all countries in the world have faced the crisis. So Cameroon is not particular. But I would say that economic crisis is just like a human body having a headache. When you have a small headache, if you don't treat it, it might turn up into a tumor. So economic crisis is the first step of a deplorable economic situation, which means that it is economic crisis like a signal, a small signal, telling you that your economy is not moving on well. So if your economy is in crisis, it means some objectives that you were supposed to attain, you're unable to attain those objectives. Just like, because the economy is like a human body. The day your head is paining or you have headache, you won't go to work. You lose the day. It will affect your income. That is how we have economic crisis. So
the whole body is affected.
The whole body is affected. So economic crisis is like a normalcy for an economy to experience crisis some particular periods in its growth. Now, talking about...
All right, maybe I'll just... Is an economic crisis different from an economic recession?
Yes, very different. Economic crisis is the first step into economic recession. Economic crisis is simply a reduction in the production capacity of a country, meaning that the country no longer produce the same quantity or spend the same revenue as it was spending in the previous year compared to the projected year. Which means if you look at the expenditure of 2019 and the expenditure of Cameroon or production, what we have spent to produce in 2020, they are not the same.
All right.
So the GDP, we have what we call the gross domestic product, which is our production capacity.
Yeah, it shows that the GDP contracted in 2020 was 2.4%.
Yes, 2.4%.
Compared with the growth of 3.7% in 2019. So there is a reduction or a decline in economic activities by 6.1%.
Good. That is a clear indicator. From that statistics you just gave, 2.4% reduction in GDP already indicates that the economy is in crisis. So economic crisis is an immediate indicator of an economic failure, but does not mean that the economy is totally down. It is just indicating that there is a malfunctioning somewhere. If care is not taken, the economy will move to the next phase, which is recession. When it gets to recession is a period of between 3 to 5 years. If there's a continuous decrease in the GDP, the economy will get into recession. Recession means that the activities are continuously declining, which means that if we were exporting 1,000 barrels of oil, it might drop the next year to 500, drop the next year to 250. That is already an indication that we have economic recession. And in every given phase, there are measures to put in place. If care is not taken during periods of recession, that continuous decline would take the economy to depression, which is like a stagnation of the economy. Means that unemployment will be massive, inflation will be high, and the economy will remain stagnant. Nobody will want to produce, nobody will want to buy, because there will be no money to buy. At the same time, there will be nobody to be motivated to produce. So in that case, that is the worst situation that an economy can find itself in.
All right.
So
now back to Cameroon.
When I say I accept that we are in crisis, if you look at Cameroon from the statistics you gave, there are a lot of reasons for that drop. The COVID-19 is paramount. Well, the Anglophone crisis, let's not forget, we have internal crisis. That internal crisis is stretching the budget. And by the time the budget is being stretched, it will affect the GDP automatically, which means that government will spend more than they will collect as revenue, which means continuous deficit in their budget will bring the economy down to crisis. So there are so many other factors within the economy and out of the economy that may cause the GDP to decrease.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That leads us to the second question. They have acknowledged that Cameroon's economy is gradually falling. So what are some of those policies that can be put in place in order to get back on foot? Notch, I will turn to you. So what are the measures that maybe government or entrepreneurs like you can do to boost back our economy, despite it, because we'll live with COVID-19. It just started in 2019. We are in 2021. We do not know when the pandemic will come to an end. So probably we will be living with it like we are living with malaria already. By so doing, what are some of those policies, I believe, permanent policies to be put in place?
There are so many policies. For example, the government can work on its fiscal policy. The government can work on its monetary policies, can work on its supply side policies, and also industry operations. Now, when we talk about fiscal policies, what is the government doing in terms of infrastructural investments? That's an example. What's the government's attitude towards that? What's the government's attitude towards a cut in income tax? Because if workers, for example, have to send out 20%, 19% of their income into taxes, what percentage will be left to care for other necessities, maybe at the level of their families, their personal needs? Remember that there are other things that they will be handling which also involve taxes. For example, when you're doing purchase in a store, for example, the store takes into consideration maybe its tax policies, how much it pays in the level of taxes and all of that. But now, when it has to do with you, if you've already spent a whole lot on taxes, maybe at the beginning of the month, maybe from your salary, cuts and all of that, what percentage do you have left to handle your family? So the government has to review income tax cuts from workers. This will help them to have enough income to handle their activities and will permit money to run around in the economy. Infrastructural investment. How much is the government putting in infrastructures? That's the question. How much is the government putting in? Is the government really doing everything possible to make sure that the level of, let's say, hospitals, schools, and all these general facilities that need to be available for the general community are available? These are things that will help to improve, the economy. We are in a country where the government only thinks of how to increase their revenue, but they don't look at like immediate revenue. That's what I mean by revenue. They don't look at what can be done, in order to build consistency in the revenue. It's easy for the ministry to build a new policy that will permit people to,
or maybe that will permit the government to fill its coffers
exactly,
within a period of time.
Immediately. They don't look at, okay, what can we do in a long term so that we have consistent, income coming in. These are things that the government has to look at. They have to look at their fiscal policies, their monetary policies, and all of these things. If they look at this, then, and they try to readjust it, there can be a change, And to back up what I said initially, still related to investments, but not infrastructure-wise, I spoke of what's our level of production, what's our consumption nature, what does the government, what possibilities has been put in place to ensure that as a country, as an economy, we produce and we consume what's from our own source. Because we have the resources, Vanessa. It's not like I don't think that we are a very poor country. We are developing, yes, but we are not that kind of poor country where we say we don't even have the resources. We have resources to use to make available a lot of things for our communities, for our own population, for our own consumption, and this will permit money to turn around, within us. But if the government can work on things like this, it will help boost up the economy, and we'll avoid getting into a situation where things will be going, from bad to worse.
Our communities crying out for hunger.
Exactly.
Every day. Akumdeep, what are some of those aspects that government can put in place? Maybe government and probably individuals, entrepreneurs, can put in place to maintain our economy.
Yes. Usually, just like I said earlier, economic crisis is just like an illness, a very small illness that affects the economy. So to resolve it, you look at the causes. Because just like if you go to the hospital, the doctor needs to do a diagnosis to know actually what is wrong before giving a prescription. So the first thing the economy needs to do is to look at the causes, the long-term causes and the short-term causes. If the economy realizes that there have been a persistent economic crisis, which is taking the economy into recession, then it means there is need for an immediate policies, which means short period. And I will give some of the short period or emergency measures that can relieve an economy. One of the emergency measures is that can immediately be used is reforms. Like he said, they should reform the fiscal policy. I think in Cameroon that has been done severally. When the government is in need of money, they change the tax code. They vote a new tax code, apply it, because it raises quick funds. Immediately, they can boost the economy. But many economies will criticize that move. It's just like squeezing energy from a dying man. Somebody is dying and you want to use his blood to cure him. It means that, so most economies will not go in line with that policy of reforming fiscal policy. Though it is also good in a capitalist economy because there are some people that are richer than others. So the government can now take more from the rich and then give an enabling environment to the middle class and the poor to also meet up so that production level will increase. The government, within a short period, can take a loan. Loan is one of the easiest way to refinance an economy in crisis. That's why you see our economy will always solicit for loans from the international donors. That would enable the economy to immediately close the gaps within the economy. There might be a trade gap, there might be a tax, a fiscal policy gap means they are spending more than the revenue. So their public sector net cash requirement will be very high, and they don't have the resources immediately to finance that cash requirement. So they have to borrow. So borrowing is another measure. And most economists will criticize borrowing. Borrowing still means you are surviving to be ill tomorrow. It means that you survive today, but tomorrow you get back to the same problem. So you see, those measures exist, but they have their adverse effects. If we go to the long term, if we realize that the economic crisis is just starting, the economy now can adopt long-term measures like improving human capital. Train your citizens to be more productive, and in a period of 5-10 years, you will see the economy will grow.
Growing.
That is one of the objectives of the World Bank. The World Bank Group will always invest in education. If they are giving a loan, they'll precise it, use it on education, health, because by the time your human capital is healthy, and they are more literate who can impact the economy, thereby in future the economy will come out from the crisis. So human capital, improvement of human capital is a long-term measure. Another long-term measure is improving the efficiency of governance. Poor governance has plunged most economies into crisis, into long-term crisis, and into depression. So if there's an improvement in governance, governance means that the way the public affairs are managed, if they are efficiently managed.
So in your opinion, does Cameroon fall under these countries of poor governance, crippling the economy?
Well, if you look at the elements of poor governance, you yourself, you will see that if Cameroon falls on it, what causes poor governance? Corruption, favoritism. So if you look at the ranking in Cameroon, you know where Cameroon falls. So you yourself can conclude if Cameroon has poor governance.
All right, I just wanted to get your opinion anyway.
Long term, one of the long term measures is efficiency in governance. When there is that smooth running of the public affairs and the structures, I think in the future it can solve economic crisis. And then soliciting for expertise knowledge from the world, from the international organizations, IMF, you can solicit for them to come and build you a new policy.
IMF, the World Bank.
Voilà. That's also another long-term measure on economic.
All right, or World Trade Organization.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Akumdeep. Notch will end the show with you today. Deep talk of the COVID-19 as a paramount cause and the Anglophone crisis currently going on, which has crippled most industries in those regions, for instance the CDC. So if we will have to boost back this agricultural sector, what can be done? Maybe 1 minute, let's go.
Like I already mentioned that in my last point, it's simple. Work on improving productivity, local based productivity in everything. What do we consume? We have farms, we can create plantations.
All right, we're talking about individuals that are faced with a crisis.
Of course. These regions are also land-filled regions, so it's the same thing. It boils down to the same thing. Work on you're talking about agriculture, right? Good. So work on improving, agricultural productivity in these regions, and that's it. And you see and then encouraging consumption too, because production can increase, but consumption is instead reducing.
It's reducing.
Production can increase, and then we find ourselves exporting instead of transforming them into final products for final consumption here. So work on all of that, and then we'll see how we will get the economy to a better level.
Epiana Chavi, he is an entrepreneur, and Akumdeep, he is an economist. Thank you very much for contributing in tonight's program. That was it. All is in a bid to see how the country can grow to higher heights and why not attain emergency 2035. Stay tuned to DBS television and enjoy our programs. Goodbye.